Who here remembers Showbiz Pizza? If you've never heard of it, I've got a little story to tell before we get into this homebrew game. There was a Showbiz Pizza that I used to go to as a kid because one of my favorite things of all time was combining pizza and video games. And Showbiz Pizza had plenty of both. So, birthday, party, whatever, I would want to go there. If there was an option to go to Showbiz, I was all about it. And through Showbiz Pizza, I discovered an arcade game called Ladybug, which doesn't exactly sound menacing or fearsome or high adrenaline. Not exactly the sort of thing you would think would appeal to a little kid who was looking for lots of action. You know, you might think I'd gravitate towards Donkey Kong or Galaga or Space Invaders or something like that, but Ladybug caught my eye for a very unique reason. Back in the day, Showbiz Pizza used tokens, and because they didn't want people to cheat the system by fishing a token out by drilling a hole in the token and dropping it in and yanking it back out again once they'd gotten a credit, they used slotted tokens. These tokens had grooves on the back that would only fit into the coin slot one way so that you couldn't pull them out once it had dropped back in. I don't think I've ever seen any other arcade that used tokens that went to the lengths that Showbiz Pizza did. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, when I got my handful of tokens and went to play video games, I put one in Ladybug and it jammed. It didn't go in, it didn't go out. It got stuck in the coin slot. To make matters better, or perhaps worse from the arcade's point of view, when I tried to pull it back out, it gave me a credit. So I pushed it, and it gave me another credit. And I pulled it, and it gave me another credit. There was something wrong with the coin mechanism, and every time I pushed on it, I got another credit. So needless to say, I racked up like 10 free plays of Ladybug before all was said and done, and I was more than happy to just stand there and play Ladybug for a while and keep all my other tokens and not even have to use them until much, much later on. So this random game that I stuck a token in that I probably couldn't have cared less about suddenly became a favorite of mine, and to this day has remained a favorite of mine. It's an iteration on the Pac-Man formula of clearing a maze and collecting all the items in the maze, but it does it in a very unique way. Before I get into that, though, I should explain why this is a homebrew review and not a video game review. Well, there was a planned arcade port of Ladybug to Atari 2600. It was even mentioned in one of Coleco's products catalogs, as was shown in the opening scrolling video from AtariAge.com, but it just disappeared. No one knows if a prototype was even developed. Nobody knows if they even started working on it. The video game crash took a lot of things that were in the works or planned to be in the works and just completely trashed them, and they never happened. And Ladybug for Atari 2600 seemed to be one of the victims of that situation. So a homebrew programmer took it upon himself to take what they had proposed in their catalog and make it a reality. He wanted to see Ladybug on the Atari 2600, so all on his own, John W. Champeau ported this to the Atari VCS aka 2600 back in the 2000s. To this day, AtariAge.com still sells his game, which you can buy either individually in PAL or NTSC for $25, or complete in box with cartridge, manual, and a nice display piece for $40. I would recommend the latter because it's a beautiful box and manual, but if you want to be on the cheaper side, I can understand that, or maybe you just don't have shelf space for a complete in box game. But more to the point, why would you want Ladybug? Well, if you've never played Ladybug in the arcade or anywhere else, let me explain it to you. See this maze that you're traveling around as this little ladybug eating all the pellets, dots, whatever you want to consider them, nutrition for the ladybug, right? The ladybug needs food to grow. But there's other insects that don't want the ladybug to eat it all, and they're chasing you. And how do you get rid of those? Well, you can't kill them. You don't have an energizer like Pac-Man, but you have doors. You can push your way through the doors and trap them, or you can create a path for yourself where they can't get to you because the doors are blocking their way. So each time you see a door, you go through it, and you either create a new path or you block off an existing path, and that's how you survive as the ladybug. Sometimes you'll want to take a risk and go through a door to get to a bonus. There's a couple of different kinds of bonuses here. One is if you just go over a heart, you get a multiplier that increases your score for every item you collect. Another is the letters EXTRA. You can only collect them when they match the color at the top of the screen, which is yellow, but if you do that and you spell all 5 letters by collecting them all, you get an extra life, hence extra. Then there's a different mode called special, and if you collect all the letters for that, you get a special bonus stage where you get nothing but vegetables. The vegetables are shown to you at the beginning of each round, and they only come out when 4 insects have left the trap. And when do insects leave the trap in the middle? When the timer runs down in the countdown around the edge of the screen. You'll see it slowly move from one side to the other as it's doing right now. And when it gets all the way to the bottom, that's when it changes to a new color and a bug is released from the trap. So you can't get the veggie until they're all out. But then the veggie is very hard to get because you've got to avoid all of the insects that are all coming after you. So there's a lot of challenges here. You want to get a high score, you want to clear the maze, you want to get an extra life, you want to get a special stage, you want to collect the vegetable for the big bonus, but you want to avoid all of these bugs. It gives you a whole lot of different things to juggle. It's not easy to do. Not in the arcade, not on ColecoVision, or not on this port to Atari 2600, which I'm just going to say is a very faithful adaptation, not just of the arcade experience, but of the comparable ColecoVision experience, which, to my knowledge, was the only official ported version of this game. This one is unofficial, but it's every bit as good. John did an amazing job programming it. And there's actually a tie-in to a previous game we covered on Homebrew Review. Remember Climber 5 by Nathan Strum? He actually did the artwork for the label and the box. So Nathan is directly involved in Ladybug. He didn't code it, but he definitely helped to bring it to a retail release thanks to his sterling design. Now, the footage for Homebrew Review looks pretty good here. It's clear, it's crisp, but sometimes the doors aren't showing up or the maze color isn't quite showing what I was seeing while I was playing it. It just didn't capture it perfectly. I can tell you it looks this good on a real Atari VCS, and in fact, much better. It's as good as you're seeing and slightly more than that. So if you're playing it on a Retron 77, it would probably look this good as well. If you're playing it on the Analog NT Mini Noir through the FPGA mode for Atari 2600, it would look even better than this. This is a very, very good looking, sounding, and playing 2600 game. You can't get much more faithful to an arcade game than this. There's a couple of other arcade ports for Atari 2600 that have come close though. Galagon, which was a homebrew port of Galaga, that one's pretty damn good. And Baby Pac-Man from Pac-Man Plus on Atari Age, man, he even managed to include the pinball table section in that game, which it hadn't even been attempted before. Nobody had even attempted to port it to any system ever, and he found a way to port it to an Atari 7800, so once again, my hat's off to him, and I'll have to show that one in a future episode, but for now, I can safely say that John W. Champeau was the champagne of homebrew arcade ports when he made this version of Ladybug. It's everything I remembered about the game, everything I loved about it. You'll love it too.